Well, can I get a motion to approve today's consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
As presented, and I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's approved. Meeting mail, we have none. First appointment is at 5:05, Mr. Michael Gagnon, here to talk about veterans housing in the town of Acushnet. And I know there have been discussions about turning our former library into veterans housing potentially. I'm assuming you're here to give us an update on that project.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome. Please go. Oh, Hannah, good. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Materials here. For the record, my name is Michael Gagne. I am the town administrator for the town of Acushnet, and I'm also the president of a group called Partners in Housing. And we were incorporated and have a 501c3.
Mr. Gagnon,
Sure.
please.
We are incorporated, and we have a 501c3, Partners in Housing, and we have acted as the nonprofit, non-governmental entity on two projects that are underway, one having been completed in Dartmouth, and that's the conversion of the former Dartmouth State Police Barracks on the corner of Champion Terrace and Route 6, and we're currently in design and the grant development for a second project on Anderson Way, which will be 12 units of housing for senior adults who have developmental challenges and physical challenges. Half of the units being assisted living and half of the units being a congregate care.
Is Anderson Way right near the State
Correct.
Police Barracks? It is.
It goes right in between the Smithfield
church.
Congregational Church.
Yeah.
It goes to the Housing Authority property, which is in the rear, called Monroe Terrace.
Okay, thank you.
All of these projects have been a joint project between Partners in Housing and the Dartmouth Housing Authority. So some time ago, this board and town meeting and your Community Preservation Committee approved funds for an analysis of what is known as the Russell Library. And we discussed the concept of doing a regional veterans housing facility in both the town of Acushnet and the town of Mattapoisett agreed, and we split the costs of analyzing the facility. Now, if I could take a moment, I'll show you a little bit about what we've come up with. Facility has been analyzed by architects J.M. Booth and Associates, and we believe, based on what you have there for space and development of a small addition, you could get 13 units of accessible, handicap accessible
What's the average
housing.
size per unit?
They're fairly small. They run in the 600 to 700 square foot range, which is generally what the folks at EDA look for. The units that we put in, and there's a picture actually in your folder there of the facility in Dartmouth. And that unit there, we have nine. It should be the second item under your agenda there.
What is that?
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I thought I was looking for a floor plan.
That contains, I didn't put a floor plan in
Yeah,
there.
I know, I'm familiar with the old state barracks
Yeah.
building.
And that unit there, that building there, with the addition, has 9 units, and they're the same size as this here. That building has veterans in it that are veterans from all different conflicts. You'll see in the newspaper article, they have an article of who was involved in the rental of that in 2016. They did a follow-up article a year later on the facility and how things were going and, you know, how it was working out. And they actually have from a Korean War veteran right up to some veterans that are of the current conflict in Afghanistan. Individuals who came back home but didn't have a home to go to, and that's where, in fact, they have lived. It has worked very well. Our housing director, Connie Desbian, often comments that it's probably the least amount of work for her as a housing authority director. They have an excellent social group in there talking intergenerational about different things in their military service. So what we looked at on your facility was trying to repeat the same arrangement, and that would be each of these units is fully functional for an individual with a small kitchenette being handicap accessible, a handicap accessible bathroom, and then they share inside there, they share in combination with sort of their living space where they would have a couch, a chair, and a television. They also have the area where their bed is. What we did with this project...
So that's in your own space, you're not
Right.
sharing a living area?
Nope.
It's your own private living area?
Right, you can be in that space, but you also have a common area which has couches and chairs and areas where you can get together if you want all the members of the house for different functions. What works well with this is that when we did this project, we actually had individuals and organizations who actually sponsored fully furnishing these units. So basically, you showed up with your clothing, you did not have to get any furnishings, you didn't have to even get the silverware and the utensils in the cabinet were there. And we had organizations like the Rotary Club, the Lions Club, the Dartmouth Women's Club. They all put the money together, and they each have a plaque on the door or entrance to these rooms that says this was sponsored by such and such an organization. And we got 9 of them. But a lot of families who have deceased veterans, they want to commemorate. This house is actually named after 2 very active veterans in Dartmouth. One of them was a Marine Sergeant, Charles O'Connor, and the other one was Charles Sisson, which you may remember was the Council on Aging director for many years. So we named this facility after them. But what you would have in your unit, these are the 2 staircases you have in the front. You'd have an entrance, you could come right into this area, and there'd be 4 units right inside that area there, so that you would be able to have them on the ground level. This building will have an elevator so that you can get up to the other levels. And the building actually lends itself very nicely to a community living arrangement, because when you go up to the 2nd floor, you can create 5 units in this particular area here. And you'll see right here, this blank space is the common area, which we set up with couches and coffee table, televisions, stereo. And that's used generally for a lot of sort of gatherings and discussions that they may want to have, or just relaxing together. And there's actually a room right off to the side here. And what we do with the facility in Dartmouth is that's a location where an individual who can help them with veteran services comes once a week. They're in that office. You can make an appointment with them, and they'll help you get the same sort of services you would get if you went down to the town hall and met with a veteran service agent. And then finally, what we're looking at is up on this area here, which is sort of that space that had the staircase up, that we would have the balance of the units right up on that space there. So it has a nice layout. It's not all...
And 13 total. in that
13, yeah, yeah. So it lays itself nicely out to that. So sort of where do you sort of go from here? And I sort of put a little outline in the front page there, because what we did with our project is you've got to go and you've got to take this conceptual design and you have to walk it out and start doing actual design and construction drawings to come up with a number. And that can be expensive. As we all know, architectural and engineering services are expensive, but you can get a grant from a group called CDAP, which is an Economic Development Assistance Corporation. It is also a nonprofit 501c3, and they gave Dartmouth $75,000 to bring their project further forward from this stage here where you are now to a point where they could actually have numbers and estimated costs of what it would be for the project to construct it. Then when you have that, then you're ready to start making applications for grants. You're going to be looking for a DHCD grant. We have talked about what they call a one-stop grant. Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito are very, very pro-housing development. They put forth a bill and a proposal to fund $1.8 billion in the creation and retainage of housing for senior citizens, veterans, and other groups that
Would this
cannot.
be fully grant funded? Is that what you're suggesting?
We did in Dartmouth. We did not use any taxpayers' dollars. We went back to the Community Preservation Committee, and our Community Preservation Committee in Dartmouth gave us $500,000 towards the project. All the other money, all of the other grant money came from various federal and state programs. And that's why they use the one-stop program, because one organization may put in $500,000, DHCD may put in $1.5 million. You know, it comes from all those entities, but there's no taxpayer dollars. The one we did in Dartmouth, 9 units, that project was $3 million to build. And, yeah, I'm sorry.
Can you flip that back over? Because I'm
Sure.
looking at your little footnotes, and you got first floor. What's on that floor? What's that, the basement level?
That's the basement level that you have now. What that would be is there would be a bedroom on each of the corners, then there would be a unit.
I just
right-
seen 3
come in.
floors, and I've been in the building, and I'm not familiar with the 3rd floor. And I thought I was in the attic.
It's the attic. It's what you refer to as the attic. They can use that space.
Okay,
With an elevator. Again, it has to be serviced by an elevator. Yeah.
okay. That makes sense then.
And then you have, on this floor, you have your mechanical, and then in the back, each of the tenants have some access to a tenant storage area on that, what I call the first floor, but it's the basement floor.
Okay, so, no, that's the basement floor, right?
Yep. The
Yeah.
road, the street would be right over here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
So, what we're really seeking is really a couple of things. One, your housing authority would be the entity that the property or project would be administered and run by. The housing authority manages this in Dartmouth. Housing authority applied for the grants with the housing partnership under Partners in Housing. So what we did is a little different, because ours being a state police barracks, we had to get the property transferred from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts through DCAM. That took a long time. Fortunately for here, my opinion is that if you were to advance this project and the housing authority agreed to it, you would transfer the property to them by a vote of town meeting.
I think we did that. Didn't we do that? What did we do? We didn't.
I'm not sure if we voted to turn over the authority. I know there was something that we did. I don't know if that was
We did something at the
full
last time.
authority
For the-
for the veterans' housing. We actually have Lynn from the Housing Authority here, the director.
Yeah, hi. So this is the first time I'm really getting involved in it. I'm not sure, Mike would probably know more. Was it for the funding of it, or was it for actually to turn the building over for the last?
I think it was initial funding for the scope of this
I
practice.
believe that's correct. That was what went to town
And
meeting.
that was it, because we didn't want to turn that property over to housing when we didn't know theoretically at that point what the costs were going to be, whether or not the taxpayers would accept that, if there was a tax
Sure.
burden on them or a debt exclusion, whatever it may be. I think that you're talking a different kind of scope of finance now, where there
Yes.
might be a good opportunity for the town of Acushnet to duplicate what Dartmouth has done, and provide some of that housing.
Yeah, we turned it over to the housing authority.
We turned over.
We turned over Article 29 to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to negotiate and enter into an agreement to transfer the building asset known as the Russell Memorial Library, located here, to the care and custody of the Acushnet Housing Authority for development and the express purpose of veterans' housing, or to take any other action
Okay,
therein
so-
in relation to, so the housing authority
So
has
it's,
the
well,
property.
hold on, because it doesn't sound like that's just town meeting giving the Board of Selectmen the authority to turn that over, but we never made an agreement with the housing authority to do
No,
so.
no, you're
So we
right.
didn't act on that article, so it's set up in place already.
Yeah.
It gives the Board of Selectmen the authority now, depending on the scope of the
Yeah.
project and whether or not we come to agreement, that it's an open article, right, Ms. Hebert? It's considered an
Yes.
open article, that we can either choose to opt out of that article or to move forward with it, and we don't have to go back. Selectmen back then were proactive, just in case this was to go through, we wouldn't have to have any more hiccups and wait for town meeting.
That was us, we were proactive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was us.
Well, I said the board, I didn't say me, right? It's always a we. So that's what we did. So it looks like the writing's on the wall, if the board decides and the townspeople say, and you're gonna endorse it, if it's not gonna be any cost to the townspeople, I believe, or even a small cost to them, I believe that'll be endorsed by the people of Acushnet because it's for a good use, right? And there's something that this town desperately needs, is more senior housing. And I think that every member of this board would support veterans housing. I know I would. I'm a huge supporter of veterans. I'm involved in some different veterans programs that I support, and I'm proud of that. But you can't do anything at any cost, right? So that's a little bit longer discussion. But based on what you've told us so far, it looks like there's a lot of financing out there for us to go after.
It's improved significantly. That financing was announced in July. I can tell you that both the Mattapoisett Community Preservation Committee and the Mattapoisett Housing Authority have voted that they wish to continue to do this as a regional project, and we would share in the cost if there were funds appropriated from community preservation.
Sure.
We do not look at this time to use tax dollars. We feel that really the next big step is the CDAC funding for going further on the analysis and the costing of what a project like this would entail.
Mr.
Right.
DeRoche.
Well, I have some initial costs that were given to me back in May, and they do concern me somewhat. I mean, the initial costs come in at $4.2 million for this project, and that's now. If this is going to take another 7 or 8 years, what will this number grow to? And I do believe we're splitting hairs a little bit because, correct me if I'm wrong, Community Preservation Act money does come from our taxes. So
It's
we
your
are
surcharge,
using...
your 1% surcharge.
Correct, 1.5 or so, I think the town of Acushnet
That's
has. So we are using money. So they broke this down to $317,000 and change per unit. My question is this the way to go, or should we be looking at a less expensive way to create veterans housing? Because I'm totally behind the concept of veterans housing and low-income housing and that sort of thing. But, that's just my concern now. And how much, I just quickly noticed that Dartmouth gave $510,000 from their CPA money. I know Acushnet, Lisa, I know you're on the board, or you're the secretary of the CPA, we have about 180 in there, or,
For housing?
For housing, yes.
for housing in the CPA account.
Yeah.
That's the total, that's the total.
I think just for housing. So there's like 5 categories CPA is distinguished by. Mr. Gagnon knows more about it. There's like 5 different categories. Housing is one of them. Housing is something that I don't even know the last time we spent money on housing out of CPC, to be honest with you. I think it's been a long time.
Mr. Gaspar, 2 years ago, we approved I believe it was at town meeting, we approved 140,000 or 70,000 for presidential terrace. So taxpayers.
Oh, yeah. I was talking new housing. I apologize if I misconstrued that. You're right, we did for the different things that we would do.
It has not been spent yet, but we're working on it.
Right.
What they did with the Dartmouth project is they bonded it. So they didn't take all of their reserve in the housing reserve for their contribution. They in fact bonded it over a term of a number of years, and their allocation that they got from the state and from the surcharge, they make the payment on an annual basis. Now, Mattapoisett, for the sake of discussion, if we were to split this, Mattapoisett has the Community Preservation Act, and again, we would have the same situation. We wouldn't have enough in reserve. So the conversations we've had is that we would bond it, maybe a 5-year note, but that way we could participate, be in a community about half the size of Acushnet.
I go to Ms. Hebert, had a number for us.
Yeah, so for FY20, the balance for community housing specifically is $25,829. But our budgeted reserve, which is like the undesignated for CPA, has
So
$171,189.
we've got 200,000 that could conceivably.
Well, let's not forget.
Depends
we
if you don't
still
do anything
need-
else.
No,
Right.
that
We
doesn't
still
include
need
the
to
money that's
fix
for
reserved
everything in
already.
the town.
That's
That's
undesignated.
That's undesignated
That's
and
all
open to be
undesignated.
spent.
That's all
Okay.
undesignated.
Yes,
Right, but we don't know what somebody else may come in front of the Board of Selectmen to look for an
For this
expenditure
upcoming
for the
meeting,
upcoming
yes.
town meeting, whether it be the Parting Ways building, because we still have renovation costs there to complete. Any other project, Council on Aging, whatever it may be, any building, but anyways,
Right.
neither here or there. Well, I mean, I understand it's a large number, Is it achievable? I don't know, and I guess the bigger question is, I mean, Mr. Doris makes a point, maybe you do basement floor and second floor, and maybe the third floor, you don't add those extra units, and you only go with 9 in Acushnet like they did in Dartmouth, and drive that cost down, if that's gonna be a sticking point, I don't know. But I'd hate to turn the property over, and I think it would behoove the Board of Selectmen to do that without knowing what the costs are gonna be, whether it's gonna be a bond, because when you say bond, that's a debt exclusion, so, and that's bound by the taxpayers, and.
No, the bonding authority is community preservation, no debt exclusion, no. What you would do is, community preservation for larger projects has the authority with approval of town meeting to bond and to pay the bond notes from their
CPA,
balances.
Okay, and it's just separated from like a debt exclusion,
Right,
where it
not
can't
a
fall
debt.
back on the taxpayers outside of what the taxpayers are funding the CPA, the 1%, 1.5%, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So on Mr. DeRoche's comment on that, and that calculation, what they're doing with the second project that I mentioned in Dartmouth, that they're doing on Anderson Way, the 12 units of the congregate and the assisted living, that project is being run and sponsored through Partners in Housing, which has the 501c3. That project there, just so you can have a comparison, is 12 units, all new construction, brand new building. That's $3.2 million for 12 units of housing. So what these organizations do, and you'll read in that literature I sent you for CDAC, is that CDAC helps communities, they're a nonprofit, to work through these organizations so you can do the construction much more affordably. Because that number there is running it as strictly as a town municipal project, prevailing wage, and all of those issues. When you do it through a nonprofit such as Partners in Housing, it substantially reduces the cost. And what you have is an agreement that Partners in Housing will then transfer the property upon completion to the Housing Authority. Fairly common in a lot of communities, they do it like this, yeah.
What would, Mr. Gagne, what would our next steps be if we want?
The next step really that we need to do is, I would say that if the Board of Selectmen in Mattapoisett and the Board of Selectmen here in Acushnet vote to authorize, we would proceed to file for a CDAG grant, which is on a rotating basis, for the amount of money needed to analyze and bring drawings to a point. Then when you have that, you're able to sit down with the various state agencies and then find out how much money they're going to bring in. But that's a full 100% grant. Again, there's no money that comes in.
So we're still exploratory stage, we're not
Yes.
committing to do this project.
Right.
We're saying, we're interested in taking the next step, which is trying to get
Right.
those numbers down from,
Yeah.
or get a better handle on what the numbers are based on better drawings.
Yeah.
And so
So-
we'd authorize you to apply for a grant.
Right, what we would do is, it would be a grant that we, again, they look very favorably on regional stuff. So what I would do is I would have the Board of Selectmen in Mattapoisett vote it and sign it, and then this board do the same thing. So we submit it as a regional project. It helps tremendously. They're very much focused on that.
What would that number look like? We're saying we can get a grant, but how big would that grant be?
Dartmouth got $75,000 to do
And that would be a
the
study,
analysis
feasibility
to
study,
this stage.
cost study.
Feasibility stage, costing analysis, and drawings to a degree that they can get good takeoff numbers for the various aspects of what has to be done to that facility.
You know, the town, excuse me.
Yeah, Mr. DeRoche, go.
Another concern I have is kind of a timeline. The town is liable for this building as it sits there. It's been empty now for 5 years. It's deteriorating, falling, well, you know, it does deteriorate to a certain extent. So we could have vandalism, we could have fire, we could have anything, and we're kind of responsible for this.
Sure.
So, you know, I do have a concern on the timeline of this project. You know, if we're gonna have to make a decision, if this is gonna take another 5 to 7 years, and this building is sitting there, and we're liable as a town for it, then that's a consideration I think we have to weigh in our decision for the project.
Yeah, we do have water damage already occurring.
Yeah, I've been through the building when Brian was here. We went through with the architect a couple of times. But if you actually take a look and you go to the webpage that they have for the Housing Authority, It took DCAM nearly 4 years to transfer the state police barracks to the Dartmouth Housing Authority. And there was significant damage because they have photos inside there. The building is secured as best as possible, but to be honest with you, they're gonna strip everything out of there. You're basically gonna use the exterior envelope and the windows and those systems, but they're gonna take everything out of there. So that plaster and ceiling and things you see falling in there, that's all coming out. That heating system's coming out. That plumbing's coming out. We can actually bring you some photos of what the state police barracks looked like when we started, and basically we stripped it right back to the studs. Because you gotta divide these buildings up and you gotta make them fit. So you're using the envelope, you're preserving the historical character of the building. You drive to that one today, doesn't look any different than it was the little estate in the state of Massachusetts, bought it from the little estate and used it as a state police barracks. So it looks like a house, looks like a residence. It was one of the more prominent families in Dartmouth. But you go look at it today, you cannot tell that there's 9 units inside there. It looks like a very nice home.
I noticed that this plan also has 2 additions, 2 wings, if you'd
Yep.
like to call them, or gable ends, that will extend from the main
Right.
library structure right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Yeah, that's, I was looking at it and I was like, the footprint looks a little different.
yeah, the back half
Yeah,
is. like
there are additions on it, you're correct. Yeah.
So,
Could I?
So who, I'm sorry.
No, Mr. Gasper, go.
Who,
I'm just gonna wrap
who,
it.
I mean, I know is JMBA the architects that do police stations and all that stuff too? That name looks familiar when I was.
It's Joseph Booth. It was originally Joseph Booth
Yes,
and Chip
so-
Gillespie.
Yeah, it must be.
They used to be, I'm drawing a blank on the name of their architectural firm, but Mr. Gillespie, Tim Gillespie passed away. So it's now J.M. Booth.
So what originated this concept versus a more, like Mr. DeRoche was alluded to, there's some protruding parts of the structure that'll come out of the building, so it'll look a little bit different from the outside. Who came up with this concept and said, let's do that and let's expand upon the building and like, instead of looking at the building and its footprint that it is today and driving costs down and saying, we could do 6 units and let's be happy we're getting 6, who decided to do the extra?
I mean, you could stay within the confines of your building, but you get to a certain point in a construction project that it behooves you to maximize as many units
Oh, I
as
see.
you can in one project.
So by adding the extra space, you're probably only spending an extra 20% to get the extra 5 or 6 units.
Because you're already staged, and you're
Correct.
already subcontracting
Correct.
and everything.
And who's if there's lead to be found, who's responsible for that reclamation?
Well, the building still really is in your custody.
Right.
I mean, if you turn it over, those are some of the things that you would do in the analysis to find out if there's lead paint in the building. Is there asbestos in the building? Is going to be an asbestos abatement? You really gotta, with that CDAT grant, you're gonna be able to drive down and say, hey, this is a good project, or this is not a good project.
Right.
You're not at that stage now.
Mr. Gagne, gentlemen, just for the sake of time, we probably didn't
Yep.
allow enough time for this, but we scheduled this from 5:05 to 5:15, and we're, would the next step be, you'd give us something to consider voting on? Is that a
Sure.
reasonable request, that you give us something that we review and consider, and we bring it back again, maybe invite you back again, something we could consider voting on that would support your application for the grant money? Would that,
And the other thing I'd
and
like to
maybe we'll
do
allow you some more time next time we
is
do
extend
it.
the offer to you and any officials who would like, is that we would give you a tour
Yeah, I'd like
of the
to,
facility.
Why don't we field trip?
I was gonna ask you if is that something that you're open to, or the folks at these particular facilities are open to, where we can kind of make a call to either you, yourself, Mr. Gary?
What I would do is I would set it up with the housing director and, give the tenants a notice that we're gonna give a tour. There have been tours in there since they're living there, and there's been opportunities for the people I've toured to talk to the tenants and, get their feelings on, how they like it, how it's working for them. So I'd be
I mean,
more
once
than
you
happy
see
to
one
sit
unit,
down.
you've seen them all. I don't think anybody needs to be going through every unit. I mean, they're
Right.
pretty much duplicates of one on one side of the building, one on the other side of the
Exactly.
building. You get the
Common
common
area.
areas, you get the picture, we know what's going on,
Yeah.
we look at it, you just get a better feel and concept of how this entity's gonna function in the future, and maybe, if there's some questions in anyone's mind, whether it be the Board of Selectmen and Mattapoise, the Board of Selectmen here in Acushnet, it might be able to erase some of those concerns and not make them hangups. And the CDAC grant that we go after will give you a better definition. I think that the reclamation of lead in asbestos is a major concern. It's a major expense depending on how much of it you got. I know a little bit about that, and the numbers can really run up pretty high. So I mean that's a concern as well. So I think if you got to the CDAC grant and you were able to have these folks come in and really give us, the board, a better analysis, like you had said, of exactly what's happening inside, that maybe we do it and you come in with the alarms going and go, this ain't a good idea. And we didn't anticipate this $1 million worth of cost.
Sure.
And then maybe that kills the project. I don't know. Maybe it's, hey, we don't have any problem, moving forward. I don't know where we're at until we get.
We find out where it is on the affordability spectrum.
Mr. Gagne, could you coordinate with Ms. Hebert on next steps and, proposed agreement that we could vote on, and give us a sense of what next steps are, and we can
Good.
bring that back and maybe bring you
I'll work
back
with Julie on
with
that,
that,
yeah.
with that document in hand. And
Good. And also the Housing Authority Director and
Yeah,
I have had a
absolutely,
chance to
absolutely,
meet.
yeah, we need to include the
They're
Housing
willing
Authority
to
in all
work
of
with
this,
it
absolutely.
also.
Absolutely.
Good.
She's right there. She can be included anytime.
We can all set up a tour, because we'd like to go and check it out too, so.
Very good. Field
That's
trip.
great. Well, I very much appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Gagnon.
Ms. Hebert has some guests who are next on the agenda, and we're running a little bit late, so appreciate your patience.
So these are financial consultants from Hilltop Securities.
Hi, I'm Sandra McNarty. I'm Managing Director at Hilltop Securities in Boston, and we serve as financial advisor to the town. We have for decades, actually. It's nice to be here. This is my colleague Abby Jeffers. And I'm not sure
Nice to meet you.
I'm not sure what you're hoping to hear from us tonight, actually.
Exciting, happy thing.
Thanks
we
for coming
had
in.
we had talked about kind of doing an overview of where we are financially, and as everyone knows, we just went through the credit re-rating, and we were successful in getting upgraded. So I'm kind of giving a little detail about that, and I know we had talked before too about OPEB and how OPEB is factored into our financial statements, and how it's important that we are doing something about OPEB, even if it's only $100,000 every year. So kind of a little along that line.
So
Yeah, I know you were on the call with Standard & Poor's.
Right, we both were, yep.
Both on that call, so we got some good results of that call, so maybe just talk about what that does for the town and what you see when you look at our financial position, just an outside independent look at the town of Acushnet and what you see, and things we should be thinking about as a community would be helpful to us.
Sure, well, you're doing everything right now.
Good start,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, I don't know, we don't know what you know and what you don't know. So Standard & Poor's is one of two major rating agencies that rate debt in Massachusetts and around the country. Moody's is the other one in Massachusetts. So Standard & Poor's wanted to do a surveillance on the credit rating because the town hadn't been in the debt markets for a while. So they contacted us and asked if they could set up a surveillance call. And they said there was upward pressure on the rating at the time. And you did move from a AA to a AA+, the only next higher rating is a AAA. And so you're very high. They ranked you, so they rank you based on a number of factors. One is management. You came out strong on management, and that has to do with all of your fiscal policies and your debt policies and your, what you're doing with regard to capital planning. Also, they rate you on your financial results, and we can talk about that in a second. They rate you on your debt and all of your debt metrics, and your debt includes not only bonds outstanding, but it also includes your unfunded pension liability, your unfunded OPEB liability, and they rate you on your local economy, the strength of the local economy, how it fits into the regional economy, and you came out good there too. You basically came out really good on all of it, and they concluded, and so they raised you from a AA to a AA+. That, is
And
valuable.
AAA is the only level higher than that.
Correct. And there's probably, with Standard & Poor's, they probably have about 70 AAAs in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a really high-rated state. There's a lot of wealth in the state, a lot of debt is issued in the state, and there's a lot of strong management in the state. Ever since Prop 2.5 went through in 1980, there's a lot of There's a lot of strong management around the state, and Standard & Poor's gives a lot of credit for strong management. So your demographics could be less strong, but they give you a lot of credit if you've got strong management and strong financial results. Because strong financial results reflect strong management generally.
Just talking about you, Julie.
So they also, part of the rating has to do with the institutional framework in which you issue debt and how your debt is allowed to be structured. And in Massachusetts, it's pretty conservative. That's the general law that governs how you're allowed to, what you have to do generally. Like you have to have a balanced budget. And in debt, you can only issue debt like a mortgage or equal principal payments. You can only issue debt for as long as the useful life of the asset. And so they, came up with the AA+. There's probably another, what would you say, 50, 75 AA pluses in Massachusetts. And then most municipalities in the state with Standard & Poor's are rated in the AA
So
category.
we're like top third, give or take?
You're in the top, I'd say you're in the top third at this point, yeah, definitely. There's not, we used to be Massachusetts, we had more non-investment grade credits than any other place in the country, any other state. That was back in the, after Prop 2.5 went through and everybody had to cut to meet it. We're way past that now, and everybody's evolved and developed fiscal policies. To be a AA+ and to borrow money, you're probably, all the credit spreads, the difference between the highest rated and the lowest rated is pretty narrow these days. Everything is pretty condensed and everything is pretty low, so borrowing rates are low. But we're selling bonds all the time, and 20-year debt right now is probably selling at 2% today. And if you and that would be as a AA, as a AAA, it might be. As a AA, it might be 210, and as a AAA, it might be AA plus 210, and as a AAA, it might be more like 2%.
So we get 10 basis point savings
Say 10
potentially.
basis points, but on a large project, and if it's
It adds
on a
up.
larger project, it definitely adds up. That's,
It would have to be a pretty large project for that .1 to count, right? The 10.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
$1
not-
million isn't necessarily, but we sold.
Usually when you're looking at like a mortgage, a 0.5% on like 300, 400,000, depending on where your housing's at in your community. You look at something for 300,000, and if interest rates move up 0.5%, you could be kicked out of that $400,000 range, because now you can only afford 350 because of that
Right.
0.5%. That could be detrimental to some people, but 1% is 0.1%, I should say. It's 1 basis point, right?
Yeah.
So, it's good if you're gonna go out and borrow $20, $30 million and build a
Right.
school and things of that nature.
Well, it's
but
good
if
in a
you're-
different market environment, so if rates go back up to 4 and 5%, you're gonna see that widen, so it becomes more worth 25
That was
basis
my
points.
question, if
Yeah.
in the crazy world that we're living in now, where everybody thinks that we live in, so there's a lot of negative yielding debt out there in the global economy, right? Which is very dangerous in my opinion, but they're basically paying people to take out money, right? If interest rates were to go back to a more normalized, basis, call it 6, 7%, is that spread will widen?
Yep.
So like right now, because it's so low, you're saying the spreads are pretty tight?
Everything's
2%
compressed.
versus 2.1. If they were to go to more normalized rates of 6, 7%, would that spread be an actual whole basis point, one full percentage
It
point?
depends on the market, probably not a whole percent between AAA and AA+, but when we had the Great Recession in '08, there was almost no market access, and there was a flight to quality, and that meant AAA, not AA+. So, we see that a lot. There is a differential with AAA debt versus AA+, and for the town, you want to give, do you all have copies of your credit report that you got?
So we have a giant outstanding debt booklet that we didn't bring with us, but
Well,
I
not
know
that.
there's a big packet out there that I'm reviewing right now.
Well, there's a skinny
Ms.
little-
Hebert actually put it together, and it's quite astounding. I'm familiar with a lot of the town's debt, just from the knowledge I've had from the past.
Yep.
But I know we have certain debt, water debt.
Well, this is just the credit report that just came out.
This is just a copy of the final report for Standard & Poor's.
The second to last page just talks about
Thank
what
you.
would move the credit rating up, because this basically, in the front, it gives you an overview of how they look at how they're looking at the credit, and you can see right on the front page, the bottom part. So they have strong and very strong. So there's very strong, for AAA, you'd probably, you'd not very strong, but they've got strong economy, strong management, strong budgetary performance, very strong budgetary flexibility, which is your reserve position right now. Very strong liquidity, that's your cash, and very strong debt and contingent liability position. So your debt, unfunded pension, and OPEB, they see as very strong. And you're doing everything right, and you are contributing to OPEB. You don't have that much unfunded OPEB liability relative to other peer group.
Relative.
Relative.
Yeah.
See,
Well,
you say we don't, and when I seen the number, I think I don't either know if my shoes left my feet or I went through the ceiling, or one of those two things happened, because I think whatever number, we've had different people come in and tell us the number's $12 million. We've had people come in and change their mind and go, oh, it's $15 million, and I got all the paperwork to prove that the number's been thrown out all over the map. It's very disturbing. $12 million is nothing to shake a stick at. It's
No.
very difficult.
Well, one of the things is, you are living within the constraints of Prop 2.5. So if, 12 million is 12 million, you gotta amortize that over time, whether it's pay as you go or however you're gonna do it. And so to contribute 100,000 is a good, it represents a really strong gesture on the part of the town with the rating agency, that it's on your radar screen. As municipalities around the state start doing more, you're compared with them. If they start doing more relative to their unfunded OPEB,
Yeah.
everybody's on a schedule with regard to retirement, so they're pretty happy with how retirement is being amortized, but it's OPEB that's, not required. And most people, the plan is, we'll pay off the retirement and we'll use those same funds for OPEB. Well, they don't view that as a plan, because they're concerned that the retirement is going to get pushed out further, because the retirement's going to be hard to keep up with.
Mr. DeRoche, you had a question?
Oh, no, I'm just agreeing with that.
So on the back 2 pages of this, it talks about what it would take to get upgraded, and it's what would move the rating up
I mean, up
to AAA, yes. So the flight to and it's really not out of the town's reach over time, if that's your goal. I mean, it depends on what your goals are. I mean, you just almost, they were in arrears with regard to the town's rating, because you've had a lot of strong performance in the last couple of years and you hadn't been reviewed. I mean, they almost called us and said, we want to upgrade the town.
What page you on for the
Page 5 at the
under
bottom.
under Outlook? So it's like one sentence?
Yeah,
That's it? It sounds, it must be easy.
well, that's good. No, well, we always say it's not rocket science.
Okay.
But there's also a downside, they don't want to see any deterioration of what you've already built and established.
Yeah, so look at the next page, that's what would move the rating down.
Now,
So,
you look at you're familiar with our debt structure and what we've got for obligations, big
Yep.
loan on the police department, good sized loan on the golf course. Does it make sense to refinance any of that? I mean, 10 basis points doesn't sound like a lot.
we looked at that, that's not the 10 basis points, it's that you're not, well, for one, they've eliminated advance refundings, where you
So we can't even, if we
you
wanted
can't even
to.
do it
Yeah.
until you are in a position to call in the old
Is that
debt.
true on the golf course too? You familiar with that debt? Are we?
You've already actually refinanced the
I know,
golf course?
yeah.
We did.
Do it again.
And I think that there was
We
some.
just kept
Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
correct. But is it impossible to refinance the golf course? Are we locked in? People seem to believe that we're stuck with that.
Well, it's not eligible today. I know that you're not at year 10 from that refinancing.
So it's just a
and
period of
typically-
time where we couldn't do it if we wanted to.
Right, and typically when you refinance, it's not like when you refinance a mortgage and then you go and take out another 30-year loan. If you had an initial 20-year loan and you refinance it at year, say 15, you still only have 5 years left. And there's no extension of maturity when you do a refinance.
Really?
Correct.
That's a government?
Typically.
Well, you could extend it if you hadn't issued for the full term of the asset in the first place.
Well, the golf course is a forever asset.
Well, no, but it's constrained by 30 years under state law. So you can't, I mean, it's a golf course is a construction.
I'm a commercial
loan.
lender. We
Yeah.
refinance stuff all the time.
Yeah,
for-
but we're not doing anything.
All the time forever, so it's a different business.
The longest under
Just-
Massachusetts laws for local government
Okay, so
is
that's.
30 years.
Okay.
For some water-
30-year life of the
Some water
golf
can go
course
for
from
40
day
years.
one. and-
Some water projects can go for 40 years, but generally construction projects are 30 years, and so is land acquisition.
Period. What if we
So-
put up a clubhouse at the golf course? Could we?
That would be up to 30 years,
That would be another 30, just on that piece of it or on the whole thing?
just on the golf.
Well, it would be a new
We could do 30 on the whole golf course, probably.
It's new debt, but just for that piece of it, or could we recast the whole debt?
Well, if your original debt was issued for the golf course 20 years, then if you went to refinance it, you could refinance it for the extra time, but you have to have a present value savings under the state law too. So you have to at least, normally
Yeah,
people
would.
refinance debt to save money. If you're gonna extend it out an extra 10 years, you
save
can't
money.
do that if there's a loss. So the state law would require that you have at least $1 in present value savings.
That's the only reason we do it for. Just like Asper.
But you can't refinance any debt until you're right at the call date. So if you've issued 20-year debt, typically there is now a shorter call, but it was a 10-year call. So at 10 years, you could call in the debt in years 11 through 20. You used to be you could call it in year 5. The federal
We can
government
call.
changed that.
We can call.
The town has the right to call
Okay.
that debt in. But so on the police station and the golf course, you're not at those, you can't do a current refunding, which is like a mortgage refinancing. You're not at that place yet.
Two different animals, because the golf course has been refinanced, and we did it back in 2015, I think it was, that we refinanced it to bring down our principal and interest, just because of the conditions of golf and that fiscal time after that we talked, you alluded to the 2008 Great Recession. I don't see anything great about it, but it was a recession, financial crisis is that we had. Any financial crisis takes a few years for it to trickle into the real economy. In other words, you start seeing layoffs and effects, but you don't start seeing people and businesses start hurting. It takes a little while to weed itself in. So we did a refinancing on that, and I thought that we did a refinancing for an additional 7 years or something, and they said, because of that, we can't go any further.
I think
with
you
that
already
debt.
did do that. You originally, I believe, had special legislation in connection with
We
that.
did,
golf course
we did, and I
project,
think
right.
that's what's tying our hands, so I think
Yeah.
that we're done, and
I
there's
think
no
you went out to the
possible way.
maximum term at the time.
So you're saying about calling, you brought up an interesting point, you talked about the police department, because we've been on the books now for the police department, I'll say 6 years?
Yeah,
5, 6
right.
years?
You're 4 years away from the call
So,
date.
5 years, 5 to 6 years, Ms. Eva?
Yeah, so they had said 2024 is when we would be eligible to refinance that.
So that's what you're speaking of, the calling in of that loan, so we have to, everybody has to wait for at least 10 years when you go out for a borrowing before you can redo the bonds on it and call
Right.
that in.
So we've shortened that to 9 in the current market, and it has no negative impact to say we'll do it at 9 years, we'll call in years 10 through 20, say.
Right.
But you have to wait for 9 or 10 years, yeah.
But that's as soon as you can do any kind of debt then, so you're stuck with that debt for a minimum 9 years, we'll call it. Just for
Yeah.
my own personal knowledge, it's something that I didn't realize that it can be called in, but there's a time frame where they won't, like the bond people that you make agreements with, they're expecting to get paid the 2% or whatever it is over
Right.
time. And I'm sure that is there a penalty when you call in that?
No, there's no penalty.
To the people that what happens if you bond and you're doing it with somebody different than the people that you have original bonds with?
So when you sell bonds, you set forth the deal, so that anybody who's buying the bonds knows exactly when their bond could be called in. If they're buying a
Maturity.
bond that matures in the first 10 years, it cannot be called in.
Okay.
If they buy a bond in years 11 on out, they have to look at what the coupon rate is on the bonds. That might
Okay.
not be the yield on the bond, but they might want more yield if they are at risk of having their bond called in.
Sure.
So they know that when they buy it. And what's happened since, there's been tremendous number of bonds refunded in the last 10 and 15 years. Almost everything that could be refunded has been refunded.
That's because they were stuck at a lot higher interest rates 10 or 15
They were.
years ago, right? You look at what interest rates were 10 or 15 years ago, this is like the refi thing on people's mortgages. So I know people that if they're at 5%, they're remortgaging at 4%. I'm like, is that 1% really doing that much to you? And they claim it does, I guess.
Well, so what's happened since all the refundings is that the buyers of the bonds are putting the high coupons that could be refunded prior to the call date. And then they're putting lower coupons after the call date. So a lot of the debt that's being issued right now is probably, it's questionable whether it'll ever get current refunded. But your debt that was issued when it was might be able to be current refunded, but not till the call date, because Congress eliminated the ability to refinance it more than 90 days before that call date.
And we did
So you're
do-
kind of stuck
we
with
did do
getting
a
to
lot
that
of
call
debt,
date.
40 years, because the records I talked about, it's in the water people's bills, and I said it's gotta be there because it's there for another 30 years, and that was already 10 years old.
Was that
right?
USDA?
Huh?
US,
I'm not sure what what it is. I
They
just
would
know
allow
that it's a
40
40-year
they would
borrowing
allow
because there's still
40-year
30 years left on it, and we've been into it for at least 10 years, right? So God, it was 40, 45-year borrowing, it's a long borrowing.
Anything else we should be thinking of as a community, anything else? I mean, we just went through this risk rating, anything else? I mean, we talked about OPEB and a pension, I know we're working to fund our pension, I know, and then after that, we're gonna work to fund our OPEB liability. Anything else you see as our stabilization, as a percentage of our budget, things like that?
One of the things that they say here is that you've got strong management, and if you look on page 3, even though it's the second page. I don't know why they do that. Page 3 under strong management, it says, a second paragraph, first paragraph, review the town's financial management and strong, good financial policies and practices, indicating that financial practices exist in most areas, but that governance officials might not formalize or regularly monitor all of them. So I think that the low-hanging fruit for the town is you can kind of keep progressing on everything, but I think the low-hanging fruit would be to do what you have to do. I can't tell you exactly what that is today. I would have to look into it a little bit more. But do what you have to do to be very strong management. Instead
Is
of
AAA really achievable for a community of our size?
Sure.
Is it really? Yeah.
Well, they tell you what you have to do. You probably have to add a little bit more to your reserve positions, and you may or may not want to do that. You may or may not be able to do that. I'm not suggesting that you get to AAA, but one thing that you could do is improve this strong management score to be very strong management, and then decide if you want to be AAA and what else it would take. But we've seen a number of issuers at the Cape where they've got, they didn't have policies, and they've established policies, or they didn't have very strong policies. They had strong or good policies, which is, the good is really where you hardly have any, but they're good enough. But when they moved it, it changed the rating. So, we've got a very strong financial position, I apologize.
We forgot to announce that when you started speaking. All cell phones off, please.
Sorry about that. So,
if we stay, I mean, I know that there's, Ms. Hebert, she's, at heart, she's a town accountant, and everybody wants to, we want to be in a strong financial position because it helps the taxpayers of Acushnet, right? But, I mean, we're at a AA+ to go to AAA, to string your taxpayers along and push more.
yeah, I'm not
It's not
suggesting
really
that you do
something that I don't think, based on what you're saying, isn't it really relevant? So we'll strive towards stronger goals to try to, but we're not gonna push the limits on what our people can afford to do and pay just to become AAA. Because the savings, and if you look at borrowing, some people can argue, who wants to borrow? I know that there's certain borrowings that we do, short-term borrowings that we do, and I don't know if that's affected by your bond rating. If it's short-term, it can't have that big of a detrimental impact on you, but there's not much in the town of Acushnet that I could see that we're gonna say, well, let's go out and build a, high school. So, I mean, you might have water infrastructure again, which is tough, but the board's coming to some conclusion that we're gonna do something in our water infrastructure. We'll see how that's gonna go, and then you've got sewer. Phases of sewer that we may do, and we might be, we might have some tricks up our sleeve on how we could do projects like that without, beating ourselves up. But, overall, I don't foresee, I hope I don't anyway, because I don't think the taxpayers want to hear, hey, we're gonna spend $5 or $10 million on this project. I mean, we got the police department we just did. We have still some overhang from our school department when we did remodeling of the school department. That's coming off the books in, I think, 3 years now. So we're close on getting that debt off the books. I know some people may say it's good to have debt on it. How good is there something that where the state or the credit rating agencies look at a town and say you're a $32 million budget? It's because I know they say it's good to have debt. I'm not a believer in debt. I hate debt. But I know that it builds credit, and it's how your credit rating's good because you make your payments and everything else. But is there any kind of rule of thumb for percentage of debt that a town should keep on its books? Or is that just a false narrative and it's what you really need at the time? And if you don't need to have debt exclusions, don't have it. How would you advise that?
They look at a lot of different debt metrics. They look at debt service as a percent of your budget. They look at debt per capita. they look at debt as a percent of the value of property in the town. But I don't think, going back to your point before, I'm not suggesting that you do what you have to do to become a AAA. I think that the very strong management issue is something that is just, it's low-hanging fruit. It's something that you could do probably very easily, change their perception of that. The value, you've already done, getting the AA+, you've already done something that improves the perception of the town of Acushnet generally.
Sure.
By anybody, whether it's an investor or somebody that wants to buy a piece of property. It's a AA+, and it represents a lot of flexibility, it represents a lot of strong management, and I think that, they get excited about moving, young people, when they look at where they want
It's
to live.
definitely a key metric that people look at when they're deciding where, if I'm gonna buy a home, whether it be here, and I'll use it in Buddytown,
Yeah.
Freetown.
They're getting into it now.
And the school system matters and things of that nature. so-
Exactly. So I'm not suggesting that you, I just wanted to point it out that's what, these are the 6 things they look at, and they say here what it would take to go to AAA.
And it doesn't hurt us to move to AAA. It doesn't hurt the taxpayer, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't have to, at all. I mean, you could be, there's very strong management, you're already at strong management, so that's really, could be considered stellar and good.
And
enough.
management's not people, management is
Just a couple
systems, management
practices
is
that are-
reserve funds, management
Yeah,
is
I mean, I think
debt
they were
level,
really
all of it.
impressed with the rating call and with what the town is doing. I think
I
this,
was on, I listened. It was-
yeah, the town has been doing a great job for a really long time, actually. It's kind of, and they called, talking about, they noticed that there was upward pressure on the rating. So, now that we know how they think, because they became very transparent from the recession, that with how they do everything, that it's an opportunity, since they're saying that you're not ranked as high as you could be with management, that you could do a couple things to just,
Sure.
why not, strengthen that? You've got that then in your back, you've already done that for next time that you do anything. When we listen to the CPA.
And you really wanna maintain what you have. So
That's
we know we have
AA+.
strong,
Yes.
right? And so you try to do, the board, I guess, would be with the hiring and firing authority, so you try to do your best to maintain
Yeah.
the management, and so some of that is people. I mean, there are systems in place as far as management, the board has a lot to do with the budgeting and have over the fiscal years to say, no, we're not doing this, and no, we're not doing this. We've brought in different management, and, they're doing a great job, right? So, I mean, it's something that the board needs to consider and say, to Ms. Hebert, a lot of credit to Ms. Hebert, she's done a lot of different things in accounting. Congratulations and good job, and keep up the good work, right? I mean, that's really what it's about, is building a good team and then keeping a good team. That's good leadership.
Yep, and we gave you the copies of the 10 best management characteristics and exactly how they view strong, very strong, good, so that they basically become so transparent that it just takes time to look at it and think about it and what it would take. I don't think it would take much, because you've got a lot of fiscal policies in place, they're good ones. I think that it would, but it's the only thing I see, because I agree with you. You don't have to become a AAA. If you want to do anything proactive, I think this is one area that is basically easy, in some
Sure.
regards. It's not painful. You don't have to raise taxes to do it.
Yeah.
To become a AAA, you probably would have to build reserves, and you don't need to do that. You've got ample reserves now. So.
Ms. Hebert, anything to add to the conversation? Any other questions or points you'd like to see made while they're here?
No, this was good. I've worked with these two a lot. They're fantastic. I love having you guys. And I just wanted to have them in here to, let the board hear what they have to say. I can tell you all day, but hearing it from them is impactful, and to allow you guys to ask whatever questions you might have in general on our financials, because some of it can get complex, and it's nice to have professionals who do this for a living.
This is nice to have, because this one's a lot smaller than the one.
I just wanted to mention on your.
Well, you laugh, but this is a lot smaller, and this is like the bullet points of probably that big module that you have passed on to all the members of the board.
Yeah.
It's probably, 10 times as thick as this, so this is nice to be able to look through and get the bullet points of the bigger thing. And
The overview of the credit, that is
Yeah.
what that is. Yeah, that is the credit
Excellent.
report.
I was just gonna say, regarding your debt comment, when your debt, you're constrained by Prop 2.5, so when your debt service drops off, typically, if it's not filled, if you have other school projects, you can kind of fill it in so your debt service budget stays level. But we've seen in some communities, when it drops down, it then goes somewhere else, and it's hard to get it back. So when you look at your infrastructure and you look at your
I
capital
know.
plan, it's good to have
I
a
know.
plan to fill it in.
So that's the interesting conversation, is when that debt expires, right?
Yes.
And if you look at it, it's, you know, whatever the school debt is now, $100,000 and something, Ms. Hewitt, it's got to be somewhere.
120.
Somewhere around, so it's 120,000. When you take that and you split it up amongst everybody, you know, we might be talking about, I don't know, $10 or something like that. So, like you said, it's something that you, as much as it sucks for me to say this to the taxpayers, it is, when you take that money, if you're not gonna do it and give it back to the taxpayers, saying that that's off and it's coming back, you're right, it might be better off to look at future needs, whether it be infrastructure or anything, and say, this is what we need to do, and this is how we're gonna do it, without raising taxes.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
it's probably better to put it in a stabilization fund rather than just give it back. I mean, if you're not levying at you're at your lower levy limit.
Well, that was
We're at the
the
cap,
schools that
so-
We're at,
goes
I
away.
think we're at levy limits of cap. We're
Yeah, exactly, the
Yeah.
lower levy limit. So
excess capacity, we'd have nothing left.
So if you give it back, then you're gonna, and then you tax it again the next year because you need it the next year under the lower levy limit, you can kind of give it back, but then you've given it up for good. Whereas you might have a better use for it that suits the long-term purposes of the town, like,
Ms.
okay, or
Haver?
whatever.
Yeah, and that's why one of the things that we're really working on getting better at is having that capital plan, the 5-year capital plan. That was one of the things that I gave you, and I'm working with the department heads to make sure that we update it as much as possible and work with you as much as possible so that you can kind of see the future. And like you said, you know, if this debt is coming off, you know, in the next 5 years, well, these big projects are kind of coming along, maybe we'll move it up a year or back a year, depending on how it fits to make sure that everything stays level for the taxpayers, so they're not getting hit.
Sounds like we have a plan.
Great.
Great, thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you
thank
guys
you.
for coming.
Thank you, folks, for your time.
Thanks.
I appreciate
Very
it.
knowledgeable.
All right, under item 5, under old business, we've got a Green Communities grant notification.
Yeah, so I wanted to just give you guys the update on this. We've done so much with Green Communities, and once again, we were awarded a grant through them. This total was $171,494, and the projects are all for the schools. So there are projects for, it's all LED lighting. My understanding is the elementary school and the Ford Middle School, one of them is getting lighting in, I want to say like classrooms, like certain areas, while the other one is getting lighting in the halls, say. And the goal is, when this project gets completed, that the next round we would be able to apply for the grant again and do the opposite, so that between this round and the future round that we would be applying for, the school would be completely retrofitted with LED lighting. The estimate of savings for this round is about $30,000. So combined with
$30,000 in electricity savings.
in electricity savings
which
for the
is huge.
school. And so then combined with the next round, it would end up being about $60,000 total savings for the school in electricity. So this is just another good grant that we apply for every year, and we're really lucky that every year we have good projects to do that are meaningful for the town to save money. And this year, like that, we were able to give it to the schools.
So we get grants,
Yes.
and it saves us on our electric bill, and that's,
30,000's a lot of
and that's
money.
forever, and that's
That's a lot of
forever.
money.
Like the streetlight
$30K per year.
LEDs, and it's forever.
And then we did the initiative with the purchasing up to 20% with
Yep.
The net credit, yes.
the net credit thing, well, that's a huge savings as well, so I
Yep.
think that we're all moving in the right direction, and,
Absolutely.
you know, we got some momentum behind us anyway.
So I do believe that this project will be, if everything works out, we should be able to have it completed in the next few months. We're working to try to have it done by the end of November if we can, because the grant, we originally asked for about $25,000 more to complete the full project. And Jim was able to get additional funding to cover that gap with money from Eversource. They just needed the project to be completed. There's a date at the end of November, so we're working with the schools. We have a meeting with them tomorrow to try to see how we can accommodate that, because it is,
During the school year?
And it's, you know, a few
You would think
months.
that the grants would be done at a different time, so you can get into summer
So-
months and get this work done before
mean, yeah,
kids go back to school.
Ultimately, the sooner the better for us to save money as well, but we're hoping we can make it work, because if we can't meet that deadline, then there's about $25,000 that we'll have to work with the school to either come up with it somehow, or we do have the option of cutting it out from one of these projects, so completing 2 of the 3 and
Right.
working on funding later, so.
But we've got to vote to accept this grant?
I'll make a motion that the board approve the green energy grant in the amount of $171,494 as presented.
And I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Next item, under new business, a one-day liquor license for the Lions Club Clam Bake. I know this is one that we do every year. Police chief and fire chief are supportive, have signed off. Is there a motion on this request for a one-day liquor license?
Sure, I make a motion to approve the one-day clam bake special liquor license on September 28th, 2019, from 12 noon to 5 p.m. as presented.
Second.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I don't have signatures on mine, so do you have a signature one, an original with signatures? Usually, all the board members gets copied, so that's fine. As long as you have one that's copied and signature, mine's not.
Police and fire chief, yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing.
But they have to
That's fine.
this. yeah.
As long as they're on board, the certificate of liability, yeah, there's nothing signed off by the fire chief and police chief, they usually are. But the certificate of insurance is here as well, so.
We've
Good to
got
go.
a request for senior property tax deferral, and there's information in your package about a resident who qualifies.
Motion to approve the assessment deferral as presented in accordance with Chapter 80, Section 13B.
And I will second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Sorry, next item on the agenda is the town administrator, nothing, Department of Public Works, the town administrator's report.
Okay, so I have a few just FYIs that I wanted to bring up today. One is the Comcast license agreement, just to give you an idea of where we are in the process. I know that you all got a while ago that big red book, and that's the permit. It's very detailed.
You do that.
So that was the initial proposal for the license from Comcast, and our attorney is working on getting me a revised draft back. He had a few changes, just a few sections
So
where
I've been
some
waiting
things
for
said.
the revised
Yeah.
version before I read it. So I've been holding out for
It's
it.
very, very good. So he will be getting that back to us soon, and I want to get it to you guys as soon as possible, so you have plenty of time to look it over. Our current license agreement ends November 22nd, so it's soon, but I don't want to give you a huge packet to look through the day before that. Most of the language in the license itself is standard. There are very few things that are even able to be negotiated, and one of those pieces is the percentage that we would get for the revenue, and we were already given the highest percentage that we can get by law, which is 5%. So the other technicality, so when I get you the license, you guys can review it and hopefully approve everything. There shouldn't be any issues. But the other technicality that we have to abide by in this process is to have an ascertainment hearing. So the Cable Advisory Committee has posted a meeting for October 9th at 5 o'clock. And again, it's a technicality. The town has to present basically why we need the money and proof for Comcast that they should be giving us this revenue because we need X, Y, and Z. So we have some representatives from the town and the school who will be kind of listing, future projects that are in mind that the cable money could be used for. And Comcast will send a stenographer. They won't send a representative, but a stenographer will be available to keep a record of the event. Like I said, it's just a formality. We have to have the meeting, and once that ends, it would be up to the selectmen to approve the permit.
Can I comment for a
Yeah,
second?
absolutely.
So I talked to Ms. Hebert today, and as far as I know, the cable committee has been dissolved. And
No.
We did appointments, and the cable committee was not on the appointments.
Really?
So,
Because it was noted that
I'm on the cable committee, I'm dissolved.
it's usually it's a cable advisory, not cable committee.
Cable advisory.
Cable
Yeah.
advisory. So basically, we didn't, at the time, we usually, when we have to do something like this, we always do it upon completion.
Yep.
So it's like the
One
lake,
more?
upon completion. So the Lakeville Street improvement was, all the people that were on that was, just once it was
It ends
dissolved.
upon
Yeah.
Upon
completion.
completion.
So you're appointed
Yeah.
till.
So you're appointed till it's done.
So I did, and I
On
did check that
November-
with Pam after I talked to you. So
okay,
she did send me that info.
I checked the minutes, there's no appointment, so when did we last appoint?
So,
When did we appoint Mr.
yes.
Cabral? Because he's only been on for the board for a couple of years.
July
Yeah, with
18th of
my-
I'm concerned about
2017.
this and making sure
Yes,
that it's a
that's fine.
legitimate format. Is it legit?
Yes, so July 18th, 2017,
Okay.
they all have an expiration date of until completion.
Okay, good.
Yep, and Pam sent me that information, so I can send that off to you if
So
you
no
need.
need
She'll
to
send
do
it.
those every year, it's just they,
Just,
Yep, once
when
this
we decide
advisory-
you're done, you're done. And we reestablished certain names of the cable advisory, because some of the folks that we had on, I remember we dissolved that because they,
Right,
yeah.
some behavior in meetings
right.
and
The
open meetings.
people that are on there now, like it's Roger,
Yeah.
there's Chris Oliver from the school, there's, just looked at it today, so I can't.
Yeah, it's okay. So-
But-
So I think some of the employees, so the.
It's
Of
just
the
for
cable,
the
some of the
approval of the
operators, yeah.
contract.
Yeah,
They're advisory for the contract, so once the contract, the license contract would be approved, essentially that committee would be dissolved.
and looking through some of that, there's some language of, they're looking for us to do certain things with the amount of money that they're paying us and all that. So if that conversation, Mr. Cabral, because you're on the committee,
Yep.
if that conversation comes up and is, I think that this board needs to look at that and what the expenses are, and making sure that we stay within reason and we're not creating this giant salary structure, because
Oh, no, not at all.
it's
Not at all.
a 10-year plan, and cable, Julie and I talked about this too, cable cutting is a big thing now, and there's more services that just got announced. Apple TV, you got Amazon Kindle, you got Roku, you got Disney now with their own streaming service, and you have the big one, Netflix, right? So there's all these different avenues for people to be able to stream movies. So cord cutting is a big thing, and Ms. Hebert and I was discussing, it's not somebody that has an internet plan, it's only for a cable TV plan. So those revenues are only derived from cable TV, and if more and more people are switching and using different platforms, that's gonna shrink revenue, and right now, we're accumulating X percentage of money, so it's
Our
just.
problem has been the opposite, and we're so, the issue we've got with Comcast now is our problem's been the opposite. They've been paying us based on revenues that residents of this community pay them, and we've accumulated too much money.
Yeah.
And that money's available only to support
Cable stuff.
infrastructure,
Yeah.
cable stuff. It's only, it can't be used for anything other than cable stuff. So now we go back to them and say, we'd like to continue receiving the same percentage rate, which is the highest they pay.
Yeah.
We'd like to continue getting that, and they're saying to us, well, you didn't spend the money we gave you last time, why should we continue
Right.
Giving
paying
you the
you at
max.
that rate?
Right,
So we
right.
gotta go to them now and say, you know, you're right, we've had crappy online bulletin boards, we've had crappy lighting.
And we're
and
spending money
cameras
on
and-
infrastructure, we just
So we
spent some
wanna
money.
buy, we're gonna create a better experience in the Acushnet community with the money we're getting. And
See how that
I mean,
goes.
your comments are correct about the future cable, and, you know, the future of that revenue is gonna be very different 10 years from now. But
Yeah, yeah.
we're, at this point, trying to justify having them pay us at the rate that they've historically paid us, and creating
Right.
programming at the schools and
Yeah.
things like that.
And
Yeah.
so, just to clarify too, so this meeting, anything that gets thrown out of the ascertainment hearing isn't set in stone. Because as you know, what we voted at the last town meeting, that anything that gets spent from cable has to go through the Board of Selectmen. So if they throw out ideas, it's meant to be like that, a justification for why we still need X amount of money, you know, the highest percentage, but it's not setting it in stone. So
Right. And
we could
Ms.
say we
Fowler's
like the
working on
idea,
that.
yes, and we could say we like the idea of X, Y, and Z, but then ultimately, when it comes to you guys, if you say like, you know, no way, or that's not sustainable, or whatever it is, you have that option.
Sure.
This is just a formality, and it doesn't put lock anything in stone for you guys.
I'd like to just get Channel 9 and 18 working right. That would be a huge jump start for us. I mean, it's still not right, and it kills me.
And
That
we're
is-
seeing those line items now, we never saw those before, and that's
Yes.
part of what we did last year, is we said, we're now gonna start seeing that revenue and expenses, right? I don't remember how
So
that
we-
was happening.
So we had a budget,
That was a change.
create a budget, yes. So we have a salary and general expense budget. So yes, anything that would be spent through cable would have to go through you. As example, there was a meeting we had recently where there was like a $6,000 expense that cable
Well, we bought
needed.
the
35 grand, but it
bulletin
wasn't enough money,
Right.
and then we spent, well, like 8 grand or whatever
Yes.
more.
board. We bought
on
the
it.
bulletin board, we upgraded the bulletin, so we're seeing
So
that stuff.
anything like that
Yep.
you guys are gonna see and you'll have to approve.
Okay, so Comcast, we've got that hearing is scheduled for when?
October 9th
October
at
9th?
5 o'clock.
Here. I already
Yes.
got that on my calendar, I believe.
So the next kind of FYI I had, in doing the credit re-rating and being involved in a lot of stuff lately, it's really come forward that we have a lot going on in Acushnet. We all know that the CWMP study should be back in October. We know that there's a lot of expansion that could be planned for sewer. It's a big project. And when we've talked to, I've talked to the financial consultants and doing a lot of stuff, it's been brought up that the master plan, it makes sense to include the master plan as part of all of this analysis. If we're looking to build something for the future, our master plan is 10 years old, and that seems like a good time to give an update to it. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out to you all, that it might be worthwhile to start looking at doing an upgrade to the master plan. I do know that recently I was at a meeting where I learned that there is grant money available. There's a lot of grant money available for a lot of things. Serped has a master plan grant.
A good segue into the Serpent discussion, okay, good.
Yeah, so they just forwarded over some info and gave me a contact, so I'll be able to get some more information about that for you guys. But hopefully, an update to our current plan, I wouldn't think would be as expensive as
Should
creating
maybe
one
bring
from
in Harry
start.
Young and have him
Yep.
talk to the board, and let's throw some things at them. I think that this plan was put out, I think the date on the plan is 2008. And I think, Mr. Cabral, you had some work on some of that.
I was on a couple of
On that,
committees,
so I think that, it might be a good idea. We're looking at the CWMP, that's gonna be coming in. It'll give us the scope of what they've seen and for the whole town as a whole, because it covers the whole town.
Yeah.
We might wanna look at the master plan and say, okay, well, let's get rid of all the things that have been accomplished.
Yep.
And then knowing that sewer could be coming and whatever we're gonna do, and there's nothing etched in stone that sewer's gonna get done, it takes a vote of the people that are gonna be affected. But we can plan around that in districts of where sewer needs to be put in, looking at the CWMP, when we have them come in and explain that to us, you can derive a better plan, and you don't wanna develop a master plan and say, this is what we're gonna do, and then, the next thing you know, you're off on the other side of town doing something totally different. It's
Yeah.
like, that's not zoned for
Yeah.
business, so why are you putting sewer in where it doesn't need to be, you know what I mean? So
Right.
I think it's good to look at what we've done and have Mr. Young go, he's the one that created kind of with the committee.
Yep.
Scratch off the things that we have done and what the town looks like now in the new decade, right?
Yes.
Going forward.
And I think too, when we talked about the pavement management plan, and there were frustrations because we have sewer plans too, and it didn't seem to correlate. We want to make sure that everything we're planning, we've looked at from all angles. So for me, when I'm looking at some of these things, it makes sense to do the planning for a lot of different things all in conjunction, so that we're not wasting our money by, going through this exercise and then find out that we're not able to do it because of something we didn't think about.
Correct.
So to me, I think that I would like to open up the discussion of doing all this together, so that we're acting as smart as we can when we're making plans for any specific item. We're taking everything into account, because I think there's a lot economically coming up for the town of Acushnet. We have a lot that we could, really grab the reins on and take advantage of and do what's best for our taxpayers. But unless we kind of all sit down and work through every angle together, we won't be able to accomplish that.
When the
So,
sewer plan is delivered, what we want to see is we want to bring everybody in. So it's not just necessarily a presentation to the Board of Selectmen. We want the Board of Health here, we want the DPW
Yeah.
here, we want the planning people here. We want everybody here to hear that presentation, and as a group, decide collectively where we need to focus and what we need to do, and just get everybody thinking about how we take this forward as a group. And that hasn't happened yet, obviously, but that's what we're
Yeah.
sort of looking ahead.
No, this report is estimated to come in October
October,
at some
yep.
point.
Mm-hmm.
And are they tracking that? You've spoken with them? And,
Yeah, and I know they've followed up a few times to get me.
do Serpent next, because that's,
Serpent?
'cause I'm
Okay.
gonna forget if we don't do it.
No,
So-
I haven't. So, yeah,
I didn't see that.
That's not on the agenda,
It's
it's not on the agenda, it's a
I
conversation.
had some
had this
other
morning.
floating things, yeah. So, I've had a lot of discussions with Jeffrey Walker from Serpent, and one of the things that he brought up, again, while I was talking about the grants available, he brought up that there are 2 seats on the commission for every town, and right now, typically one is the Board of Selectmen and one is the Planning Board appointee. So we have Henry
Mhm.
as the Planning Board appointee, but he wanted to reach out and find out if there was someone from the Board of Selectmen who would want to be an appointee for their commission board. And so I just wanted to bring it up and see if anyone had any
They're meeting
interest
tonight.
for, in order
They're
to think
meeting
about
tonight,
it.
so it's-
I don't know how pressing it is
I
to.
might have emailed something around to the 2 of you with some of the detail they sent to me to,
And I
It's a
had
once a
left it
month
out and left
meeting
it in your
and-
bins.
And Mr.
I'm sorry?
I
Serpent
had left it
stuff.
out, I had lifted it out, left it in your bins
Mr.
earlier.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
Just
DeRoche.
just for the people out there, Serped means, is that the
Southeastern Regional Planning, Economic
Oh, good
Development.
one, yeah.
D.
Right.
What does it stand for?
Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District.
Okay.
There it is. So,
Very, very valuable resource to our area. Do a lot of good work
yeah.
with planning for things like South Coast Rail and
Right.
anything that impacts this region
Mm-hmm.
as a whole. They add a lot of value toward looking at impacts on the region, and I've been aware they've been doing what they do for 30 years, give or take, and are asking us to participate in that. So
Yeah, so, I mean, if you want to think about it and let me know if anyone is interested in volunteering.
it's one meeting a month, and and need to.
On Tuesday nights at 5 o'clock. No, I'm just joking.
No, it's
I know.
It's Wednesday. It's actually, this is an unusual night for us, so.
It is.
And it's once a month. He gave it to me. I don't have that note.
We only have one person appointed for Serpent?
2, so every,
Who is
part
it
of
though?
their-
I don't even have that
It's
in my
Henry.
appointments.
And Marilee's is like the second.
Okay. Yeah.
She's like a liaison, if Henry can't make it,
Oh.
then she could go.
Did we?
I don't get the
So-
impression it's a lot of heavy lifting. They'd like us to be represented. I
So I can make a copy of
honestly
this.
try
we
not
can
to
give
take
us-
on anything else right now, but if anyone else would
This
like
is
to
like
do
the
it.
list of the commissioners for each town that he gave.
Yeah, no action
So
right
Henry's
now.
also-
We-
No action, I just,
Yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to throw it out there because, yeah, they do a lot of good work, and he reached out to see if there was anyone who would be interested, so. The other
Mr.
items.
Gasper had a point related to that.
Oh, yeah.
So on the appointments, it's general conversation to the board members, is that Mr. Knoll is no longer here, and there are some appointments that we made him appointed to. So it's like the Energy Committee, the parking officer, ticketing officers. So it's normally the interim, it's
Okay.
usually a town administrator, so we may need to make those appointments, because right now, the people, Brian's sitting on a couple of things that he can't serve as in his capacity, and he's no longer. So
Okay.
we need to fill that
Yeah.
void in case we need that.
Should we make a motion to appoint Ms. Hebert to any position that Mr. Noble had held? And
Can we
I
do
think
that
you're
right
probably
now as a
doing-
general thing? Don't, you,
Um,
sorry. She wants to know what it's gonna be. She wants to know what
We
it's.
give her the
I
consideration.
can't
What
even
is
tell you
it?
because this isn't right. I don't even have
I
Henry
don't-
as a
So we
serpent.
don't know.
I'm gonna
Right.
say.
Let's look at it and bring it back.
Bring it back just because it's
Lisa
not on the
knows all
agenda.
You're right.
But I think we can just have. it
Looking
with it.
to name Ms. Hebert to every committee that Mr. Noble
Just every
was
single
on.
one.
It seems appropriate.
Okay, yeah, well.
He's,
I mean, we're in the,
Bring that up at the next meeting.
Oh, here we go, thank you.
Yeah, let's add that to the next
Parking
meeting.
clerk, so
But
he's
that
a
way we can
parking
list the
clerk.
parking clerk.
Energy Committee,
Let's put that on the agenda for the next meeting. And
Soil Conservation Board, TA.
I mean, we're very actively working
There's
on
like 3 of
making a
them.
permanent appointment, so.
Sure, but for right now and temporary, I mean, you never know, Miss Hebert might need as a parking clerk, she might need to give you a ticket,
Might need
Mr.
some action.
LeBron.
You never know.
You might be parked in
What
the
the
wrong-
parking clerk does is if somebody appeals.
So let's put that on,
the
let's put that on the
parking
agenda
ticket,
for next.
They, you know, they have a, she
My
can hold a
computer went dead,
hearing
what's?
Oh, no.
and
Yeah, what's
deny
that?
it or yes, there was some circumstances that, you know, and then she could say, yeah, I understand your, whatever happened, I'll waive the ticket for you this time,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mr. Noble actually had one not too long ago, so I discussed with him. So it was actually like a double penalty, and I don't know how I would get fined for two things for the same thing, but anyways, he talked to the resident and gave him a break on one of the charges versus the other one, because they were kind of duplicates, so, good,
So, the next thing that I have on here that I wanted to bring up, just as an FYI, the indirect costs. And I'm only bringing it up just to start the thought of having discussions on this. I've been involved in the finances for 3 years now, and every year, we always kind of talk about indirect costs, but it comes up at the end of the budget when it's already too late, and we always say we want to talk about it earlier. So I just wanted to bring it to the attention of the Board of Selectmen. I would love to start having a discussion early between both the golf, water, and sewer. As you may remember, the indirect costs, there are multiple things that you can legally assess an indirect cost for, but not everything makes sense for our town. And that's something that should be vetted out between the Board of Selectmen and each of the respective boards. It really needs to be an open discussion, and because there are different reasons why you may or may not have something, and there are also so many different ways that you could come up with, all right, what is the cost? Is it a percentage of something? Is it based on actual numbers? So it's a very in-depth conversation, and I think it makes sense if the board would be open to it, and the other committees, to have somewhat of a workshop with the boards, where instead of our typical meeting where we're just kind of talking back and forth, we could have like a round table discussion, whether on TV or off TV, but an open meeting between everyone, but just more of a round table discussion where we can kind of go back and forth on our issues with each of the items that might be assessed and what we think about them, because we want to work together. This has to be a joint decision between our board and the other boards. Everyone has to be in agreement, and we want to make sure that it's affordable.
Could this be redistributed to the
Absolutely.
group? This is a list of the potential indirect costs that could be allocated.
That was the old list.
This is fairly new.
Well, that's
fairly
what I say, it's an
yeah.
old list, but it's the one that
Yeah.
you had talked about, that maybe,
Yeah.
the top 3, we're not gonna go
And
with.
some of
it.
these are
It's maybe
definite,
3
some
or
of these are
4.
definite no's, and
Yeah,
some of these are definite
I
yeses.
know I have that
and-
somewhere, but it's a good
I can
idea
get
to give
it.
us a
Let's get it
recopy.
around.
Yeah, and like I said, there's a lot of discussion. I know this is.
It's a hot potato.
It's a hot potato, it's come up
Right.
at, but I think we owe it to taxpayers and the ratepayers and the golfers. I mean, we owe it to everybody that we at least have the discussion and can give our reasons why we did or didn't choose to do any or all of them. And I just would like to give us plenty of time to do that, because again, a lot of times it's come up and we're already in the middle of a budget and it's already hard to start making changes, so.
My perception on this would be, and this is something that with Ms. Noble and I had talked about a couple of months ago, and spent some time looking at the things he was proposing, that every year, for the past 2 years anyway, it's come up as something we've said we should do. We should allocate some of these costs to our enterprise funds, and every year it's too late, and we just decide not to do it because it's too late. So I think as a group, we should look at what we could possibly allocate and make a conscious decision to do it or not do it. If the decision is, let's not do it, then we've made a decision not to do it. Or let's vote to do it, but let's not take it off the table, let's not ignore it again. Let's not ignore it again.
Right.
Let's say yes, let's say no. but
These are the
let's-
reasons why.
Exactly. And, again, I think some of these costs should be allocated, some of them should not be allocated, but let's do it early before it's budget time again.
Right.
Budget time comes in.
And it could be,
December.
as you say, when we're going through the vetting process, it could be something that we look at and we may not agree with the whole, whatever it's gonna be,
Yep.
let's use pension costs or whatever.
Right.
And we don't do that, but the board says, well, you know what, we can do, because quite honestly, we're the water and sewer commissioner, so we have to determine a rate that's gonna fix the problem. Golf is different, but it takes a vote of the Board of Selectmen to do that as well. We might say, well, these are the costs, and yes, it's in, and we might have pushback, and we might be giving ourselves pushback, right, on why we don't wanna do it, but then we might come to an agreement to say, well, we'll do a phase-in plan of
Or
5
percentage
years.
or percentage
And
year.
and do and say, these are the costs, and maybe we're gonna do a phase-in, so over 5 years, we'll be capturing the full cost, but we'll incrementally do it so we're not pouncing
And-
the whole cost. I don't know, because it's a hot potato conversation,
is.
it really is.
Let's
And I-
distribute, okay.
Yeah, and I
That's
think
good.
like that,
Yeah,
everyone
yeah,
has the
yeah.
best interests of the town at heart. The town includes all the enterprise funds, so I don't think anyone is going into it with the idea that we're gonna deprive any of these enterprise funds. We want to make it as affordable as we can while looking out for the interests of everybody. So that is my pitch to you guys. I
Let's
would love to have
distribute
it
this and
started.
we'll schedule it, and we'll schedule it as an agenda item for discussion at
I've
a
already,
future.
I've already told
Yeah,
Ms.
future
Hebert that
meeting.
I'd come in and talk to her about different
Perfect.
things and start the dialogue, and I think it'd probably be good for all of us, so that when we, I think the board, we're the ultimate decision makers, the Board of Selectmen, so I think when we get in the room with the department heads in the golf committee is, I think it's important for this board to have a good understanding of the perspective of indirect costs, and we're not just in a room willy-nilly and yelling back and forth at each other. And we're gonna be in the room for 2 hours, when I think if we all kind of get a basis of what we're doing, and the board needs to have some kind of agreement before we present to the department heads on what we would like to try to do, and then listen to those opinions and make a rational decision from there.
Right.
I think that's the better way of doing things.
Agreed.
That's
So
it.
we'll get this around and,
Yeah.
pick a meeting, put it on the agenda, and whatever everyone's comfortable with getting on the agenda, go out a couple of weeks, next meeting or the meeting after, I don't think there's any urgency, but
Right.
before budget season
Right.
starts. and
Yeah, we
budgets-
got
We
time,
just
but I
have
think
to-
it's good that we brought it up and
I
started
think I'm
talking.
gonna be
It's gonna come quick,
October.
yeah, it's gonna come quick,
Yeah.
quick,
Yeah.
so.
Thank you.
Well, it's better than April when we did it the last couple of
I
times.
know.
That's my
I know.
only fear.
So, I don't have my agenda. my
The only
computer.
other thing I have,
Committee,
I just
yeah.
have one other thing, and again, it's just an FYI. I've had, there's been a lot of grants lately. This is another, I'm going rogue. We've had so many grants come up, and I've asked Lisa, is this typical? I mean, there are so many grants, and how do you say no to free money when it's something that
Yeah,
the town needs,
don't read our
right?
general, yeah.
So, one of the grants that came across my desk is for, it's the Municipal Vulnerability Program, MVP. It's very similar to Green Communities. They focus on climate change and ways to reduce, the impact on climate change. But the items that you can use the grant for, almost everything touches climate change. So they've talked about examples from other communities. Actually, Mattapoisett, I think, was one of them where they bought land with a grant. It was land that touched on water in a certain area that.
Keep it as
Conservation.
Yeah, there have been mosquito initiatives with all the EEE stuff going on lately. There have been, I know for us, like we have the dam, and that could potentially be an issue that, either way that we want to look at. It's very open. Almost everything touches climate change and could be impacted. So this grant, it's a 2-phase. The first phase is to come up with a plan, what items are important to you or to your community that you want to address. They have consultants that they've already trained on the process of the grant, where they would come in and the grant would pay for their services to help you kind of, again, similar to like the master plan and all the stuff we're looking at, what items are important for the town of Acushnet that we're vulnerable in. You come up with like 5 or 6 items, and once you complete that phase, you can apply for an action grant, and they do them twice a year. And the action grants would be, trying to achieve whatever items you've listed in your plan. Again, it's free money for the town, and hopefully, there might be projects that correlate with some of the stuff we're already doing. They brought up sewer, with like the septic systems failing and the nitrates are going into the water. There's so many things that if you're creative enough, I think you can come up with something that can link to a project we're already working on and we'll get money for. The action grants can be up to $2 million per communities, depending on what it is. So again, free money, and that also kind of ties with our MEMA grants. So part of this would be updating our hazard mitigation plan. This grant would actually also create a hazard mitigation plan, which from that point, we would be able to apply for a lot of MEMA grants. So it's a good thing, and I just wanted to bring it up to you guys so you're aware that we're doing it.
What's the first thing you think of, Mr. Cabral, when she mentioned about mosquitoes? For using that grant money? What would be the first thing you mentioned? You talked about it.
mosquitoes, less of them would be good. I don't know, what am I thinking? Tell me what
Lily pads,
tell me
LA
what I'm thinking.
Street.
Oh, I had that under, I was gonna do that on the selectmen announcements. I've got something actually.
Oh.
So that's all I
I've
have.
got something I just wanted to share, yeah, Lake Street. Town administrator's report all set?
All set.
Yeah, so under selectmen's announcements, I do have a meeting with the mayor of New Bedford, bringing our conservation agent and our health agent to talk about the condition of the ponds on Lake Street, and it's city of New Bedford property, and they are deteriorating day by day, year after year. Mr. DeRoche got some great aerial shots of the
lakes.
ponds, of the lakes. I'm gonna print those and bring them with me, but a preliminary casual, let's call it a casual
Yep.
conversation with the city, that, these are your property and the lakes are dying, and how can we work together to stop that from happening? And I think it's not an agenda item, so I don't want to talk about it in too much detail, but just want you to know that that meeting is scheduled and happening, and a lot of residents very concerned about what they see when they drive up and down Lake Street, so.
It's getting bad.
Mr. DeRoche took some great pictures from.
Thank you, it's my
from-
job.
Yeah, we're not, don't
Not to
send
do
us
it
a
for the
bill.
town.
Don't send us a bill.
But I do each week, and it's even more concerning once you get in the water and actually see it, and how restrictive, or how all the growth is restricting that pond. It's
a mess.
It's a mess.
It's a mess.
Once it
Pretty
starts
much.
choking off that supply, it just feeds on itself, and it's not gonna, one of the ponds are bad.
And the first one on the left, when you're coming.
I don't know if
when
we
you're
own
coming
that
west.
one, we own one of the three.
I
but
had my wife take a picture of that one, you didn't get that one, but I'm gonna print it out just on paper.
It's bad.
Yeah, and just bring it with me, so,
Okay.
unless you'd like to print them, and.
I might have a picture of
If
it.
you can print them, we're not gonna pay for it, but if you want to print them.
Under the
If I print them, we
selectmen's,
have
under the
to-
selectmen's thing, can I know that the screening committee's meeting upstairs
Upstairs,
right
yep.
now, and I'm just a little concerned that they're in scheduled meeting, and I looked at their agenda, and they got quite a few things on there, but Mr. Pecos never came and spoke to the board, and that was kind of like the number one thing for him to do, per the agreement. So there's kind of, I just kind of look, I don't want.
This is just an initial meeting.
Yeah, this
for
is
him
just
to
her initial, yeah, organizational.
Go over what.
Does he have
the initial-
resumes?
It
Yes.
says,
And he's
6
passing
points
out
of discussion, I
resumes.
wrote down a few, the role of the screening committee, no big deal. Already reviewing resumes, suggested interview questions, format of interview and score, sheet and screening resumes tonight. I just don't want.
Are they screening resumes yet?
It says it on the agenda, so I hope that,
They're passing them out
They're
tonight.
passing them out, okay.
we just want to be careful that,
Yep.
I was critical of saying that in his scope of his work, which I have the agreement, that I was concerned about them, so meeting with the screening committee was number like 6. And I was concerned that it should be further up the list, and now it kind of supersedes everything, and first one was meet with the selectmen, develop a recruitment plan.
We sort of did
Yeah, we did
that,
that.
And he's kind of,
We sort of did that.
Are we-
disorder and talk about the process of the questions and things of that nature. I think it would have been a good idea to run that.
How long do we accept applications?
Till September 30th,
Till September 30th,
We
okay.
put a date on that, I didn't think we were going to, I thought it was.
yes, September
okay.
30th.
All right.
On the
So we still have till
When did
till
that
Monday.
start? Because I've been watching MMA and I haven't seen it, and then I know it was put on, so was it
It was
really
put
30 days? So
on.
it wasn't September 1st.
It was right around there.
How many resumes do we have, do you know?
I want to say 9,
Okay, that's all right.
but we're still pending, obviously, we're still pending till September 30th.
I
which
do
is
plan on
Monday.
popping in on the group upstairs and just saying hi, so.
Yep.
Just one thing too that I have, just to put it out there. Monday is because there's, for the police station and police chief assessment center list.
Yep.
It's under the appeal right now because they have that 17-day appeal time. September 30th is the last day. So we should have received rather, next week, probably at the end of the week. The girl told me that it wouldn't be, because you can call in and check on it. And once the appeal process is done, that's when they go on and start putting the list together.
And we've got a date, we've talked about a date, is it the October 8th date? We're gonna bring the candidates in, and the top 3 candidates to interview?
I don't know if you're gonna be able to, if you're gonna have the list by then.
Might not.
It's
Might wanna give it
that
more
would be
time.
September 30th is Monday.
Yeah, this is-
So she said if they give it, we might be able to get it by the end of the week. That could be a possibility. but
Right,
that's up to
still
you.
be-
That's
Have you
up to
both submitted questions?
So I have it, and the reason why I am is because Ms. Hebert and I, we talked about that when some news came up about the assessment center in
Yep.
in the civil service thing, and made us aware of certain things that would materialize in there. And I thought that maybe it'd be a good idea that, and I said this, I said this to Ms. Hebert, is maybe we ought to find out what kind of things and questions were asked within the assessment center, so we're not asking redundant questions, and then we're scoring that, and they're saying, well, you can't do that because that was already done in the
So we
assessment
were gonna
center.
we were gonna provide them to Darren Klein, the questions we
We
were gonna
kind
Darren
of,
Klein.
we should kind of get an idea of what the heck was done in the assessment center, what kind of things were
Yeah.
asked there, so we're not asking the same things, and they're saying, well, you can't school me on that because that was already done. So
Right.
we want to keep the integrity of the process as clean as we can.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to do it, and so we don't have to, I mean, why would we, if I ask two and you ask two, and
Yeah.
Mr. DeRoche asks two, and we have six, and all six of those were asked in the assessment center, we're kind of not getting
Yeah,
anywhere.
but I think it's fair for us to hear directly what the candidates are saying with regard to a question we have.
Yeah, I just didn't want to be redundant.
No, I know, but
So,
If we're
why don't we
gonna
provide them, to, have you've submitted questions?
Correct.
Not yet, all right, I
I have
have,
a
like 3 or
couple.
4.
mhm.
Why don't we
Okay.
get them to
Okay.
Ms. Hebert, let's get them to Mr. Klein, and
Yeah.
we'll find out if they're fair
Darren's
game.
gotta know what was done and what was
Well, so
not.
Darren had said that he doesn't have the questions, but what was the
Pomeroy?
Why am I saying HRS? That's
The actual
not right.
was,
The people who did the assessment,
Mhm.
that it would probably be part of our agreement with them, that the types of questions asked would probably be on there, so, we'll have to look and see if it's already on there, and if it's not, we can ask them. They
Share
should
the
be able to tell us.
questions, share my questions with the other 2 gentlemen, I think that's fine.
Mhm.
And these are the questions I submitted, 2, 3, 4 questions, and, and you can see
So
what
I
I'm
know
looking to
that
ask.
the Pomeroy was the company, or the folk that was in charge of it. I think that might be the guy's name, Pomeroy.
Oh,
That
alright.
was Pomeroy, the company, whatever it is. And maybe we can submit the questions to Darren Klein, but maybe we submit the questions to Pomeroy and say, are we being redundant by asking these questions? And all he's gonna do is look at it and go, nope, none of that was done in the assessment center,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. I can do
And
that
it'll
too.
save some council costs and everything else, and then
Yeah.
scrapping with the Pomeroy and everything else. So I think there's a quick way for us to get that done.
Yep.
And,
Let's start with Darren.
we paid Pomeroy,
Yeah.
$6,000,
Yeah.
$6,500 to do it, so I don't think he's gonna have
Do we have direct access to them? Yes.
chief does.
Yeah, I'll have to
All right,
find out.
let's
The
do it.
chief,
I wasn't
Let's do it.
involved
the chief
with
can
that
do
part.
that
Let's do it.
relatively simple.
Let's do it. Get your questions
Yep,
to
yep.
Ms. Hebert, though.
Okay, you got it.
So I would like to get the candidates in here as soon as possible. So if it's not October 8th, and it's as soon as possible after, so when are we going to find out the list?
she said hopefully.
I don't want to find out the list, is
No,
the way I'm playing this, I already said that, I don't want to know.
By the end of the week.
Of
next
October,
week, Which. Stacy
October
What is
4th.
before?
Could be.
So I like the 8th, and the 8th's good, we're going to
Yeah.
meet.
Is it the 8th? I
If
think
we
if we
get
can
'em.
still make the 8th.
They don't
It's the
give you
24th
the
already, right?
exact date. She said it could be by the end of the week.
So let's tentatively plan on the,
What's another week?
So we don't have really anything
Push it out
else
another
scheduled
week.
for the 8th
Well, we're
right
scheduled
now,
to meet- we're
aside from
scheduled to meet
that.
on the 8th.
There was something I think
That's
we
gonna
had
be done by
had.
itself, we can't do that.
yeah, no, we're scheduled,
Yeah.
we're scheduled to
we
meet.
can do that. We can do it at 9 o'clock
But there
in
is,
the morning.
there is just a couple of small things, like JT's is still looking for their event license. So like, he wanted to do it on this meeting, but I wanted the fire chief to be here because he was on vacation and
He's on
I don't think
vacation in the country.
it's fair.
Let's tentatively
should-
plan on the 8th.
And we should probably talk to the chief and see where the schedule lies for the 4 sergeants, right? And try to do it on a day that's more accommodative to them as far as that screening goes. So talk to the chief, see what the schedule looks like for the 4, I mean, you're never gonna get them all, where it's their day off, but whatever time of day we decide we're gonna do this, let's try to make it as convenient as we can
20
to the
20
schedule.
minutes, 30 minutes, we'll give them,
Yeah.
we'll say this is the timeline, and this
It's
is,
gonna be at least 30 per
it's gonna be 30, all right, 30, and we're gonna say it's a 30-minute interview.
Oh, I didn't etch that in stone yet, Mr. Ross.
Well, let's decide.
If it's 6 questions,
30 minutes is
as
good.
as they said, it goes over a little bit, it could be 45 minutes, so we should just plan a little.
I think we gotta hold them all to, we gotta hold them all.
We're
30.
gonna have the salt thing and flip it over?
Yeah.
I'll time
I think we gotta,
That's
I think we gotta say this is the time. So let's try, talk to the chief, let's try to the extent we can do it in October, let's keep it moving.
Yeah.
The extent we can get it done on October 8th, let's do it.
Yeah.
That is, the next item on the agenda, that's the next meeting at 5 PM, October 8th. To the
Yeah.
extent we can do it then,
Mhm.
let's do it.
Would you
If we gotta
consider
kick it out a
maybe
week,
if-
let's kick it out a week.
If we keep it light, we'll try not to put anything else on, so that.
Yeah, I prefer not
If
to
you
have
could
it.
start at 4, say, what, I don't know what time the
Because
starts
our
working.
5-minute appointment ran
We could start
25 minutes. so-
earlier.
I don't know, that's why I'm saying we could do it, we could do a meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning, we'll do these questions with these 3 gentlemen.
morning.
At a 9 o'clock meeting on any day, because I don't think the public really has that much of an interest coming and listening to us asking sergeants,
I can-
police officer
Depending on
questions.
the day. and
So,
it's-
I mean, maybe we'll do
Once we
something like that.
Talk to the chief and find out what they,
Talk to the chief, find out what's reasonable. Let's get
Okay.
it scheduled.
Because that
I
sounds
can
good.
do during the day, but I need,
ample time.
2 weeks notice.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good.
All right, so next meeting is Tuesday, October 8th at 5 PM. We may be interviewing potential police chief candidates, we may not be, we're gonna see what we can do, and, anything else before we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned, thank you.